China isn't only the best option. China is potentially your only option. In my opinion, it's the best. Let me start things off with a disclaimer, because I know there's going to be Twitter fingers and keyboard warriors in the comments telling me I'm wrong. What I'm saying is the standard. There are obviously exceptions, but here I'm not talking about outliers. As COVID rampaged through China, a lot of these factories that weren't great at what they did disappeared like a house of cards in a hurricane. Lots of them went bankrupt. Following that, the purchasing and sourcing agents that relied on these factories for work also went out of business. Now, what was left in the rubble behind was specialists, factories that produced expert-level components. These factories remained intact because they were so good at what they were doing. When I was in grade 8, 13 years old, I got cut from my local AAU team. I don't think I was the worst player on the team. I don't think I should have got cut. And I remember my dad telling me, you have to be the best, right? There's no room for politics. There will always be people that can get through and get better results than you because of politics. But if you're the best, you're not getting cut. These factories didn't get cut. They weathered the storm. The quality of the components that they were producing was unmatched. Just the other day, I saw yet another article proclaiming that the sky was falling and that the world's manufacturing was moving away from China. It talked about how Apple was going to move away from China and set up shop in India and Vietnam and the rest of Southeast Asia. Then, however, the article took a turn that I agreed with. It said, at best, for this multi-trillion-dollar company, they expected it to take Apple 5 to 10 years to transition all of their manufacturing, or at least a large majority of their manufacturing, outside of China. I would go even further and say that 10 years is the absolute minimum. Now, it's absolutely true that a part of why this would take so long is that Apple is an enormous operation. They've perfected their manufacturing process here in China, especially near our HQ in the south of China in the province of Guangdong. Packing up and moving their entire operation to another country is obviously a very risky venture. So risk alleviation is also factored into the time that it would take a company like Apple to move their operations elsewhere. So does that then mean that a smaller or medium-sized business could then pack up their operation and move outside of China much easier, especially if it's a fairly complex product? Well, unfortunately, I think the answer is mostly no. In fact, I think it might be next to impossible for most consumer-made products. Why? Well, China simply is where the manufacturing is happening. China is where the infrastructure is, where the workforce is, where the specialist factories and engineers are. It requires those things in order to manufacture complex products. Once again, there are and will be exceptions, but for the most part, smaller sized companies will need to wait for Apple to make the investment into these other countries, to grow out the infrastructure, to pack their bags and then take the risks and spend all of the money and time required to set up similar expert level infrastructures in any country. That's what Apple and other similarly sized companies are trying to do. But these whales are trying to break ice that's 10 times higher than the wall from Game of Thrones, right? This is not a simple process. This is not a simple infrastructure. It will take many hours and many dollars to get that right. For small to mid-sized businesses, almost every country outside of China is essentially a barren wasteland. When you do find a factory, they're probably not as well organized. They probably have MOQs 10 times what you're willing to invest into your product. The reality is that those companies are too busy working for companies like Apple to produce these big products, and Apple is probably invested in a lot of these factories to ensure that they have priority for the foreseeable future. Now, what these factories learn, people will leave those factories. Managers will leave and go start out their own factories. People will gain expertise, the expertise required to set up smaller operations that are willing to take on small to medium-sized enterprise type business. Once again, patience. It's going to take some time. While that time passes, I have no intention of taking our core business anywhere except China. I believe that China still is and will remain the world's manufacturer for many years to come. In fact, as other businesses say, it might just be for the headlines, right? It's a catchy headline. It's clickbaity. China's going down. The West will prevail, right? Maybe that was a little exaggerated. But the reality is that you see these headlines everywhere. While everybody else is trying to escape, Morpho's doubling down. I've been here in China for a while. I am running a contract manufacturing business out here. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. From my perspective, if you're building a tech product, if you're building a very high-end product in any niche, China isn't only the best option. China is potentially your only option. If you want to be making the Rolls Royces and Rolexes of your niche, China is the place to do it. You need Chinese factories that specialize in building components. And you need somebody who specializes in taking those components and building complete products. That's where contract manufacturers come in. If you're making a high-end, unique product and you want to be the top dog of your niche, we'd love to hear from you. But that doesn't mean we'd be a good fit. In fact, we turn away most of the leads that come looking to work with us because it's not a perfect fit. You need to find a contract manufacturer that's the perfect fit for you and your idea. Dig in, do your research. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. Doing business in China, building a product in China is a very complex and difficult journey that you're probably about to embark on. In my opinion, it's the best route forward. It's probably your only option. Go get it. Peace.